Welcome to another LegalTech Talk session. My name is Frances Anderson. I'm the MD of NetLaw Media. And today I'm delighted to introduce our second LegalTech Talk of 2021, which will expand on the session we ran in 2020 on ROSI with Fortinet. So today's session will be Connected and Protected, Delivering Cohesive Legal Services. Now, this session is going to be chaired by Janet Day, and I'm delighted to say she's now joined us for a number of sessions on these. So it will be a delight as always. Now, to give a brief introduction into Janet, she worked in the broad sphere of legal IT virtually her whole life, with her MBA specialty was competitive advantage in the legal profession. After working in administration at A&O, Janet set up a specialist consultancy practice looking at technology services in their wider sense for law firms. She joined BLP about over 19 years ago, initially as a consultant, but later as their IT director with a wide range of responsibilities. Now, before I hand over to our esteemed guests and our chair of today's roundtable, as we're live, I'd like to encourage all of you listening today to ask questions through the variety of options. And one of them is obviously live. You always have the option to join us if you'd like to do so by raising your hand. So if you click on your name to ask a question, we'll see the hand pop up and we'll draw you in. Or through the Q&A, again, what you just need to do is look at the bottom of your screen. You'll be able to type in a question. We'll see that and we'll bring you in, ask your question live to the panel and also to Janet. Alternatively, you can put through the question in the chat window. So we'll be monitoring all of them. Now, if you've got any issues at all, please let us know and we'll see if we can help if there's any sound issues. Now, without further ado, Janet, I'm handing it over to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Frances, and thank you for that introduction. As always, I'm delighted to see so many people joining us. It's very much a topic of the moment and very much a topic of an area we all have to think about carefully. It's better that the panel introduce themselves because you really didn't come to listen to me. You came to listen to them and what they know. So I'm going to ask each one of them to just give a short profile of themselves and why they're answering questions on this topic. So, Christian, would you be happy to kick off?
Sure, thanks, Janet. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christian Toon. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Pinsent Masons. We've been here now delivering some real transformational security programs for just over 3.5 years. And prior to that, I spent a career delivering security services in financial services and insurance sector, working with some big four customers and clients alike.
Great, thank you so much. Joe, could I ask you to pick up next?
Certainly. I'm Joe Robertson. I am the CISO for EMEA, for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Fortinet, as you can see behind me. And I am, I've been in the networking business and the security business for 4 decades now, 3 of those based here in Europe. So I've got a European focus despite having an American accent.
We'll excuse you the American accent, notwithstanding what's happening in the US today.
Well, just as long as you don't impeach me, I'm happy.
We're probably not authorized to do that. So, Carl?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. And so I'm Carl Knowles. I'm the Global Head of Cyber and IT Service Delivery for HFW. HFW are an industry-focused law firm based in a multitude of offices around the world. I'm quite new to legal. It's fair to say I joined HFW in February of last year, so just 6 weeks before I was kicked out the office on lockdown. And prior to that, I was with one of the big 4 cyber consultancies, Deloitte, and prior to that, BSI. I had, just before that, a 25-year career in the military, in the British Army, where I was a network engineer turned information assurance professional towards the latter sort of 12 years. So nice to meet you all.
A very interesting and ranging career. Thank you very much for that, Carl. Can I start with just a sort of general question, just so we can position ourselves on this, all of us? We've now been in lockdown the better part of a year, and it doesn't look as though that's going to disappear anytime soon. So can we just talk about how each of you, on behalf of your firms or on behalf maybe of clients, are approaching the security issues that relate to having such a dispersed workforce and things which you think are key or important. So Carl, since you're still on focus on my screen, would you mind starting?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. So it's fair to say that before lockdown, we were in our nice, comfortable offices where we had, from a security perspective, the controls that we needed. And since we've been dispersed, all of a sudden our people are here, there, and everywhere in all matter of offices. They're working everywhere, and their offices are all different. You could be a flat on your own, or you could be a mother juggling with your children. And for each one of those individuals, they all face different sort of factors in their life, factors that will affect their awareness, affect their thought processes and their actions. Not least the technology part of the dispersed network connecting into home routers, which you share with your smart devices, your televisions, your laptops, your games consoles. It's the fact that you're now working in an environment which isn't designed for work per se. Everybody's adapted it. They've put a desk in there. They've put a chair where possible. Sometimes some people are working in dining rooms or living rooms, and so from a security perspective, it's become challenging to not just technically look after your networks, look after your people, your endpoints, but also culturally as well, how people act and the different pressures that occur in the home environment, the doorbell ringing where the postman comes, or the children crying out to help you with their school homework. So there's a lot of factors that come into it of security wider than just technology.
I can see that. Joe, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, because I think that already in our technology world, the last few years, we've been seeing changes, what with applications and enterprises and law firms going more and more into the cloud. But then, as Carl was saying, the perimeter that used to be nice and safe had already been kind of weakening. But with the last year, the perimeter has just totally disappeared, that there is no more perimeter. Everyone is the perimeter. My desk is the perimeter. Carl's is, Janet's is. The perimeter is everywhere. And that has generated enormous security challenges for just about everyone who is watching this event, I am quite sure. And we've been seeing that with our customers. The concept of identity management has become very important. The ideas of zero trust access, that it's not a question of I don't trust anybody at all, but it's a question of being careful and making sure we identify who is accessing, and very importantly, what is accessing, because with the Internet of Things, as Carl was mentioning, suddenly the Xbox is part of the Internet and is potentially part of your business network, which is not exactly the best situation to be in. So being able to identify what is trying to access and whether it should or should not has become one of the big themes of the last year, as far as we're concerned with the customers that we see.
Yes, I can see that. Christian, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, so from our experience and kind of where we've seen this kind of move is very much to the points that have been made previously. But I guess it's really put a focus on our people, both in the technology teams, in the security teams, whose kind of primary roles are there to kind of deliver the technology and deliver the protection around the business, coupled with, I guess, a way of working that traditionally for all firms alike had been office-based and kind of kings and queens of presenteeism. And all of a sudden, pretty much overnight, that was kind of dispelled very quickly. And we had to take a completely different view of risk. We had to ask those questions again to see what the security risks were against actually how do we keep the business running? And that was absolutely vital, because like many, our business wasn't prepared for the work at home kind of contingent from a security and technology point of view at the scale that we had to deal with. So people could work at home previously and kind of comfortable with doing that. But actually it was from an ad hoc basis to a permanent or semi-permanent kind of move for everybody. We had to then look at transitioning not only applications and services and people, but also the way in which our process of business would operate. Things such as printing that previously had been a big no-no for anything outside of the office, suddenly enabling and procuring print devices so people could carry on kind of printing and supporting their client delivery. And that's not because they love working with paper. That's because some of the processes in the legal communities, both foreign and domestic, still require paper-based submissions and processes. So you can't, unfortunately, spin up a Teams meeting or join a Zoom call and deliver kind of the material in a legal process that actually doesn't even account for that level of technology. So we had to move very swiftly to kind of continue to support the business, and because that was our ultimate goal. Making security and technology work better for our people was kind of sort of that byproduct of doing that, because if they couldn't deliver on the client promise, then it's a waste of time, because we're not going to be here or not be around for much longer. So we certainly had to rip up the rule book and start writing a new one.
Yes, and I think law firms have done a tremendous job really of responding to this and continue to deliver actually outstanding services to their clients. But all of us involved in this have people in our supply chain on whom we are heavily dependent and with whom we have to work in conjunction. And over the last few months, we've seen a series of really quite high-level breaches. CFAS ransomware attack in October, and then the FireEye SolarWinds one in December, and then recently this month, what's happened to Mimecast. Does that make us feel as though this is a more vulnerable environment, and what can we do to respond to that? Carl, what's your take on that?
Yes, is the answer. It is definitely a vulnerable environment. I mean, when you look at it, it's an incredible it's an ask for organisations to move away from a central location into a more disparate deployment and architecture, and then not ask for third parties to assist in delivering those services as we look towards, virtualizing the law firm, so to speak, or decentralizing the law firm. You then become more reliant on software as a service, infrastructure as a service in terms of from public or hybrid clouds. You then reach out, and we'll touch on this later, but then you reach out on using different security tools to assist you in that deployment of services, because the key thing about this is making sure that businesses key processes can work. So we pull in all these different vendors and we bring them in to assist us with it. We bring SolarWinds in so we can have a look at what our network's doing, so we can make sure that our traffic is as streamlined as it can be, and we're utilizing our connectivity as best that we can. We use our Mimecast to help us with our email protection as it comes inbound. Okay, what we don't have control of, obviously, is the fact that they are obviously targets for attack. RSA, for example, many years ago was a landing point for an attack onto something else, and it's very much the same as what we're seeing now. Is that they're going to go for these third-party suppliers as kind of a stepping stone for other organisations. So I think we need to be. It's up to us to be aware of it, but it's also up. And one of the things I'm very keen on is the fact that our third parties have that two-way conversation with us, our suppliers, and say, look, we've got a problem, and tell us what we need to know at the earliest opportunity, so we can make sure that we've got the fixes in place. We're on top of the vulnerabilities. What we don't have, and we see far too often, is a chat on WhatsApp group or something within the NCSC CISP or another collaboration platform where we're hearing about these events before actually our third parties, our suppliers, tell us about them. And you want to be having that reassurance. For us, we weren't impacted. It's quite to other other organizations. But nonetheless, we still want to be told if we're not impacted, because we don't know everything. So it's very important that communication continues.
Yeah, it's a great prompt, actually, Carl. We should probably move that WhatsApp group to Signal or Telegram.
Sweet.
I think to paraphrase Thanos from the kind of Marvel series, it's inevitable. And the idea is that, look, if a company, a cyber technology business that's established and has the expertise that FireEye has, and they get taken down, kind of what chance the rest of us got? So it's the focus on not kind of worrying about kind of that supply chain and kind of how we're going to cope, but actually putting those plans in to know that when it does go wrong, that you've drilled, you've trained, you've prepared for this type of event and scenario. And that's probably got to be the biggest thing now, because data breaches and kind of media stories around kind of bad security or kind of black hat hackers, they're kind of constant. So it's a constant stream of activity. And the key, the sort of secret here is that response. You've seen so many kind of great responses in the media, both technically and from a PR point of view, of organizations that have done it well. And then on the other hand, you've seen absolute car crashes, and it's that car crash of a response that's really going to affect your business now more. I think it's seen that the cyber events are recoverable. There's certainly that the size of some other law firms have been able to navigate that kind of cyber landscape. But I think everything is recoverable. But if you can't get that response right, then you're on a highway to nothing.
Well, speaking as one of those third parties, one of the things that I'm not going to do is do anything like gloating about what's happened to any of my competitors, because we view ourselves as competitors, but not as enemies. And the enemy is the hacker and the country level organizations that are attacking all of us, not just you as law firms, but Fortinet and FireEye and Mimecast, et cetera. And all of us, in fact, tend to share information. In fact, we've got FortiGuard Labs, which is our research and analysis frame, and they share information with most of the other technical companies in the business, as well as NATO and the Cyber Threat Alliance and things like that. And for all of us, it's a major problem. And one of the big things that I want to get across is that we work together to try to keep ourselves as an industry from being hacked like this. And we back each other to help each other to overcome this kind of a major attack.
I'm really with you there, Joe. And this is definitely about suppliers and law firms working cohesively together. This is not about a competition. This is about what can we achieve better by all of us being in the same space. And thinking about that, of course, there are a range of tools, a massive range of tools that are available to law firms. And how do people go around selecting and working out what's the best thing to use and how best to use it? And how best to ensure that your users understand its use. Christian, do you want to come in on that?
I usually put one of the Gartner quadrants on a dartboard, blindfold myself and throw a couple of flights in and see where it lands. I guess it's hard because there are 1,000,001 versions of stuff out there. It's a very dynamic and kind of robust market that there's plenty to choose from. Everyone's going to sell you something to fix the problems. I think in terms of kind of product selection, it tends to be or lean more towards perhaps those historical relationships that organizations have with vendors and providers to try and find a kind of best in class solution. Or personally, and I know Carl will sort of follow suit, is actually look our own experience in dealing with these types historically. We haven't just dropped into security leadership roles. We've been doing this for a while now, and over that time we've developed and built our own little black books of what good technology looks like, good experiences, etc. And I think that's the key. But it's not just the technology, the tools that are going to go in here. The big part of the focus also needs to be around the people and the culture of the organization as much as the processes themselves. And I think I would start with that, because arguably those focuses will help drive the requirements or prerequisites of any technology.
I think that's absolutely right. And people are so critical in all this. Carl, do you want to come in on that? And then I'll let Joe sweep us neatly.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 words: tool sprawl. Right. And that's the problem. Right. And that is about, firstly, we need to understand what tools we've got, right, and what they do, and that we are getting the maximum out of them as possible. There's going to be overlap for sure. You are going to have tools that do the same thing in different ways, only some are slightly better than others. And it goes back to Christian's point of understanding and having a little bit of knowledge from the past of, you know, what tools are better than others. Now, the problem is, and it's not a problem, it depends which side of the fence you are, is that because of all the venture capitalists and money and budgets from organizations, vendors have just increased and increased and increased. There's now cyber accelerators for startups, DCMS funded, financial services have them, and that they are growing and growing and growing. And what this does really is it gives us all quite headaches, really, of basically understanding what to choose. And it's now created a complex web of tools, which are, you know, so extremely difficult to manage. So what we need to do in security is we need to collaborate with other departments, such as the IT department, for example, so we can understand our security posture and reduce that tool sprawl. We need to work out what the problem is of the tooling, you know, going back to the point of the tooling doing the same thing. And as a customer, you know, who do I choose? Do I go to Gartner, as Christian said, chuck a dart at the dartboard? Do I go to my peers and speak to them? Or do I just go to heaps of different security events and to listen to some pitches to find out? It's very difficult. But the problem is that what we're starting to see now is there's big organizations, I'm not going to name them, that are starting to acquire these startup companies. And they're now building portfolios where you can have a whole security and compliance center, right? And we've got it all in-house. So you're going to see these, not monopolies, but you're going to see these big people take over, you know, do a bit of everything. And the key thing is here is, in the back of your mind, you've got to think about single point of failure, right? If there's a lack of diversity across tools, right, then, you know, for example, everyone going to SolarWinds, for example, and then SolarWinds gets taken down. If there's a lack of diversity, then we increase the impact of an event happening, so we've got to bear that in mind. You know, we can have a one fits all approach, but then we've got to be mindful of putting all our eggs in one basket.
Absolutely. And Joe, as a supplier and an advisor, how do you help people with this?
Well, because I talk with a lot of CISOs and CIOs in my regular day-to-day job, one of the things that a lot of them say to me is they don't believe that there is best of breed anymore, because everyone's leapfrogging each other, and that no one is going to be best of breed for more than a few months. And so they don't tend to, and larger companies anyway, they don't tend to look at that, but they are seeing exactly what Carl was saying, that the tool sprawl, and looking for not even just vendor consolidation. A lot of them are thinking in terms of vendor consolidation, but they're actually, in many cases, not so much looking at the vendor consolidation as the tool consolidation and the management and control consolidation, to have as few of those monitoring devices as possible, so that their staff is able to deal with the panoply of different devices that are out there to catch different threat vectors and different types of threats. And you need different devices for those, but being able to manage them all from a similar code base, a similar environment, that has become very important to a lot of the CIOs and the CISOs that I talk to.
Okay.
Can I add one more point there, Janet?
Please do.
Added on to Joe. So one thing that's just sprung to my mind is, the more vendors you use, the more people you are sharing your potentially sensitive and personal information with, right? Depending on what service they provide. So it's a risk-based approach there. So, you can understand why organizations may want to stick to a small amount of providers, because again, it's kind of that tricky balance, right? I go back to my point of all eggs in one basket, but at the same time, you don't want to spread your information, your sensitive data out too far. So you have
one of the important things I think in that is having open standards, having APIs, so that the devices that you are looking to invest in are able to talk to other devices or other management schemes. So if you've got, if you're using Sentinel in Microsoft as your SIM or your SOAR, that the devices that you're dealing with, whether they're physical or virtual, have APIs and can feed into that, so that you're not blind to those devices.
Sounds like the ideal view. I think in our experience and mine, sadly, that's been the utopian dream to get to, because everyone's quite sensitive with their own IP, and actually they might kind of give you an API that probably gives you 70%, 60% if you're lucky of that telemetry. And it's the issues we've got at the moment is we're trying to bring some commercial acumen to say, look, let's kind of reduce the scale of the tools and the investment we're making across multiple providers. Big tick for security, saving money from first of all, but actually then trying to integrate the various platforms. We will never go to one sole provider. It's just they won't give us the coverage. But trying to have a kind of a small amount of eggs in a small basket and then getting those providers to talk to each other is very, very difficult. At the moment, we're running about 4 or 5 different panes of glass. And I think that single pane of glass is too much of a dream. It'd be great if we could get there, but I just think there's too much kind of corporate interest from the big powerhouses to ever bridge that gap and truly connect.
And a lot of organizations.
But actually, I think one of the things that we should touch on here, because Christian brought it up, is just to touch on how much we have to manage the user community and make sure they get a better understanding of what their role and responsibility in this security piece is. Christian, could you just carry on that one? Because I know it's something you feel strongly about.
Yeah, sure. So coming to the kind of people point, and I guess not looking to manage our end users, but actually to kind of collaborate with. There are kind of eyes and ears at all the different kind of endpoints across the organization. And quite often security get it wrong because they're kind of forcing annualized training across everybody, thinking everyone has to do the same thing or kind of push it through. And I mean, compliance training has a bad rap anyway. Nobody likes doing it. It feels forced and you've got to do it. So to kind of start on that footing, you've really got to try and differentiate yourself. And instead of just dealing with the kind of tick box training and the kind of standard say thou shalt train kind of every 12 months, look at speaking to the people and kind of understanding what it is that they're concerned about. We really like a sort of approach where we kind of canvass all of our teams across the globe based on a series of kind of questions and preset kind of areas of interest. And we ask them first and foremost what they're concerned about. And this, when we first started a few years ago with this, we were about to kind of launch out with a kind of view on standard security training and stuff. And actually, when we spoke to our teams, they kind of first thing they came back and told us they were worried about was actually their own personal security, physical security, because at the time there was a wake of kind of terrorist attacks, drive-by attacks in kind of Western cities across Europe, London, Germany, etc. And actually, they kind of didn't care about cyber at that point. It was the physical security. And on kind of doing that, it kind of gave us an opportunity to kind of engage with our end users, speak to them about what they were concerned about and worried about, and then tailor that response. Again, we then kind of pushing out the behaviors or the skills and the experience to make people attracted to the training and the support that we offer. So during the pandemic, as an example, my team were giving advice on parental controls on Xboxes and other connected devices that were suddenly existing in their network. And as parents or as kind of people who suddenly became their own house IT manager, didn't know how to do what was needed just to protect themselves online. So it's about then focusing that conversation on something that they're interested in. And fortunately, they're the same behaviors you would want in an enterprise environment. So they're bringing in that good password management. They're bringing in that kind of good parental control or application control, whatever it may be, across their home network.
Joe, from your experience, how do you advise people to manage training, teaching, cajoling their staff?
That is one of the big things that I do talk with people about, is the fact that saying that our people are the weakest link, or people are the weakest link, and that's where the threats are getting in, that's not a good way to think about the problem, because people aren't a weak link. People will do what you train them to do if they're made aware of it. As Christian was saying, by talking to them, it can bring out the reality. And most people are not in the process of wanting to create greater security threats. They're willing to do what's necessary, but they don't know. There are a lot of different online training systems. Fortinet has a free one for general users that I would encourage people to use, because it is no charge. There's online training that's available. But what I think is most important is to have a culture of security being important. And that actually starts at the executive level, and having executives who care about security, who understand that it is not just something that is a compliance issue, but it's actually an issue about the reputation of the firm. It's really is a business issue, having a secure environment and having people think in terms of security. And attorneys already think in terms of client-attorney privilege. Okay, this is just an extension of that thought when you get down to it.
It absolutely is. But Carl, your comments on this one?
I love the term culture. It just means so many different things. And Joe, I'm really pleased that you brought it up, because any security program needs to be positive, and it must be based on openness, trust, and empowering our users. You're much more likely to have a lasting impact of ensuring compliance rather than the fear and the blame which we've done. So it needs to be open, and we need to bring people along. You know, in developing this program, we need to make sure, of course, we have policies and procedures, you know, which lay down the clear responsibilities and guide security behaviors and attitudes. But we should make sure that we define it in such a way that it adds to satisfaction to employees and not to disappointment, and to be seen as a negative thing. And very difficult to do. I almost think as soon as you hear the word compliance, it doesn't matter whether it's cyber security, it can be DAC 6, it can be anti-bribery or something. But as soon as you hear compliance, it's like, oh. So, you know, it's kind of like, how can we move it away from compliance and being actually business as usual, day to day? It's a behavioral thing. I also want to talk about a point there Christian raised, because I love it, what he just said about teaching people how to, you know, secure their routers at home, how to look after their elderly relatives, how to look after their teenagers, how to shop safely on Black Friday, how to be safe on your network at home. But that's all part of fostering that good culture, because if you're working safe at home, you're working safe at work, and vice versa. Yeah. Because it's all about the mindset. And I think traditionally we've been too focused on discipline. If you don't, you know, if you lose this, or you do this wrong practice, you'll be disciplined. Where we should be actually focused on what good looks like, and helping them along that way. It's difficult, right? And Joe's pointed out the old adage that I've heard many times before, that people are the weakest point. People are only perceived as the weakest point is because they have a mind. Going back to my point of this working everywhere, we've all got different things going on at a different time. When we go to click on that URL or do that, we're all in different environments, thinking different things under different pressures, right? We're not a computer. A computer is very much ones and zeros. It's yes or no. There's a thought process. So what we must do is we must train that thought process to be a little bit more back office. It's almost like when we were kids and we didn't talk to strangers, when we, you know, yeah. But we understood that when we were younger, and we was able to take it forwards throughout our lives. So it's about that kind of underpinning, sort of, I guess, that double checking and not believing what you see straight away.
Just like you learned as a kid to look both ways when you cross the street, and it became a habit. Well, the same thing can be true of checking URLs and don't click on them and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's another player involved in all this, and that's the client needs that get imposed on us in terms of how we operate and how we manage their data and what we do with it. And does that occasionally create conflicts or concerns for us as law firms? Christian?
I would say concerns per se, but I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess, the client requirements. Firstly, they do and have done, and I'm sure will continue to drive good practice and assurance around our security standards. I kind of look at it in a way, we get a lot of free consultancy off a lot of our big tier clients when they send the auditors in, which is fantastic. It's perhaps not perceived that way sometimes when we're hit with a kind of 600 row Excel spreadsheet and asked to fill it in by yesterday. But that aside, the idea is, I think that the world is waking up that kind of legal firms and professional services businesses are very acutely in the supply chain of industry. And it's important, as we talked earlier about securing our supply chain, that they do the same. So again, it's an inevitable step, recognizing that as much as the kind of the SRA or the legal regulator kind of affords certain privilege between client and their lawyer, actually it kind of goes out the window a little bit with regards to cyber, because they don't care. They'll quite happily look for the private and confidential material sat on your data stores. So it's important that they get that confidence that you're doing the right thing and you're looking after their information. I think the challenge is with most, and I'm sure I won't be alone in this, is that each client will have their own version of what they want in terms of security expectations, the Baskin Robbins of the security world, and trying to deal with all of those requirements in a single, joined up, kind of unified way that supports your business is the challenge. So it's trying to find that common denominator and going, well, look, this is kind of where it is, and this is where we're going to operate. If you need to do more, then that's where we look at kind of customizing or segregating kind of solutions for that particular client. And we've done that before, but kind of in the main, it's trying to kind of take everyone on that same journey.
Yes, and to establish a standard on which everyone can rely, so that you know where you are. Joe, you must have to advise a lot of people about things like this.
One of the things that what Christian was saying made me think of is that with so many firms moving to the cloud and it being harder and harder not to move to the cloud with, for example, Microsoft 365, et cetera, that it becomes extremely important for firms to have not just a basic level of security in the cloud using the tools that Microsoft provides or AWS, but being able to go beyond that and demonstrate to customers, to your clients, that you've got added layers of protection and that you've got visibility into what's going on in the cloud, and that you can actually show them information, if necessary, on your compliance with GDPR or security standards or encryption standards or that sort of thing. And so I'm actually curious to know how Carl and Christian are thinking about this move to the cloud and what kind of added security it has, because it's a very closely linked to this business of what the client is demanding of you.
There you go, Carl, segue in for you.
Yeah, thanks. I had some answers there, pretty good to go there, Joe, and you just swung around. But the point is, we have to be dynamic with what our clients are asking for, right? I just want to touch on Christian's point in the fact that they drive us up, which is a good thing in terms of what their expectations are from us. But they also can be our weakest link as well. Just like we said about suppliers, we must not forget that all our clients don't have perfect cybersecurity practices. In terms of the point about going towards the cloud, I do see that there's a drive, definitely from a technology front, to be seen doing that. Actually, to be seen law firms now moving towards a more kind of innovative technology focused practices, the way we operate, rather than the traditional ways we've done it before. And it can be seen as market leading, how you deliver your services and how clients can access their information and how they can collaborate, more importantly, right? All of this is fraught with a small amount of concern and danger, with regards to privacy and sensitivity about client matters and barriers. But there is a drive to do that, to build that collaboration more, using Microsoft Teams and creating, secure rooms within Teams where fee earners can work with their clients. So there certainly is a sort of a demand of that coming through. But of course, we've still got our traditional clients that like things just the way they were. So I think, like just any other professional services organization, we need to be adaptable, and having having our services, in the cloud or in data centers geographically dispersed to meet the requirements of our clients is very important. But what we must make sure is that we offer a platform for them to collaborate with us.
Absolutely. And so, Christian, there's a segue in for you, which is two parts. You can pick up on Joe's comments about the cloud, please. But then, given that we've all accepted during this discussion that there is a degree of inevitability that everyone is likely to be vulnerable to some form of attack or hacking, what's your perspective on the cyber security insurance market?
I think, like any good governance and kind of risk model that the board will employ, it's one to be considered. Whether it's right for your organisation is kind of up to your risk framework and your appetite for risks. Personally, I find it useful to have that kind of pot of cash just available in the event of needing to spend money quickly, or indeed look to try and recoup some of the costs. I've unfortunately been on the receiving end of many sort of cyber events in my career that have proved to be very costly. And as a business mitigation strategy, it's a good thing to employ. The challenge, I think, however, is the maturity of the insurance market with regards to cyber coverage. There's still a long way to go. It's not where it needs to be. And by that, what I'm looking for is, I guess, that they market themselves can look to drive down the quantity of the events or attacks that we're seeing, because they're helping businesses raise their security stakes, their security controls, and being better in this space. Because if you're not proactively using that as a vehicle to do so, you're arguably just throwing money into a kind of insurance policy that you may hope is going to pay out. But if you're using it as part of your program to drive your security program, in turn reduce your premium, and to ensure that you've got that kind of cover as a business response, then yes, I think it is a practical step. But there is so much variance in selecting the policy and kind of finding the right cover. It's unfortunately warrants a kind of compare the market kind of approach, where you can kind of tailor your coverage, scope of your kind of no claims history, so to speak, and everything else that goes with it. But it's just not quite there. So I think there's still steps to take with it. And I think it's also understanding the policy wording itself, making sure that you're not just buying something off the shelf, that the coverage and the clauses are firstly supportive of your business and don't prohibit some perhaps predefined responses, and that actually are aligned with how you would want to respond as a business. And it all comes down to that policy and the wording as to what's been procured to make sure that it supports you in your hour of need, and you're not banging your head against a brick wall wondering why they're not paying out or they're not giving you the support they need when you really need it.
Carl?
I was just thinking about the black box. So young drivers now, when they're insured, they get a black box which gathers an amount of telemetry details that goes back to the insurer to check that they're driving safely. And you almost need that for a cyber security understanding and how to be underwritten on what your risk is, because every organization of risks is different. Same with driving. An older person is less likely to have an accident than perhaps a younger person, So that's why they adjust their premiums, and it's making sure that the premiums are scalable to the organisation and the risk that an organisation faces, which is incredibly difficult. And then we go back to what we were discussing before about all the suppliers and the third parties, the ecosystem of an organisation. Almost like you're almost insuring the world, like with all these different organisations that are bolted on. So it's an incredible undertaking to do that. But what I'll talk about actually is, from an incident response perspective, going back to Christian's point of being a victim to these breaches, I think it's great that you can, that it'll cover some of the financial impacts of it. But of course, insurance isn't going to cover reputational impact.
No.
So and that's where a lot of the damage is done. So and another thing is the way we work with our insurance providers. Now, insurers want to pay out; they want to be seen to be paying out, but they don't want to pay out as much as they need to. So they encourage you to get in touch with them at the earliest opportunity. And the same is with a breach, right? So as soon as you're aware of a breach, you contact your insurance company so they can help you mitigate it. So they can help you with the response, they can help you with the containment of it to reduce the financial losses, right? So it's all about actually working with your insurance company. And if you are going to have an insurance company, you get on the phone to them and you talk about their incident response. Talk about how that works in terms of what your incident response procedures and your playbooks are, how you report into them. And actually, because going back to the point is they don't want to pay out a lot, they will help you with incident response plans and playbooks so they can make sure that you're on the hotlines to them so they can assist you right away in getting the threats contained.
Yeah, and insurance is necessary, but just like with an automobile, Carl, having insurance for your car is not a license to drive recklessly. Okay, and so it doesn't obviate the need to have good security controls in place, because there's going to be a financial hit, okay, but how are you going to get back those lost records if things have been destroyed, or the ransomware? I was talking to a friend of mine who actually is in the IT department of a hospital, and they were hit by a ransomware, and almost everything was backed up except one system that wasn't backed up. And boy, did that cause enormous trouble. The same thing happens in every enterprise. Backup systems are extremely important in this ransomware crazy world that we've got right now.
Definitely disaster recovery and good business continuity, isn't it, to reduce the impact of business running.
Yeah. Has anybody had any approaches from their insurers in the light of the changed working practices for the last 12 months to say they want to reconsider the cover or the
Yeah, we got a 50% rebate.
Hey.
No, we didn't really. Of course we didn't. It would have been nice.
I'll tell you what, I was going to get on the phone then.
No, surprisingly not. Although I'm expecting to hear from them in about 6 weeks' time, because we're up for renewal. But yeah, we're not. It's not been a vector, to be fair. We've had any contact from outside of our kind of usual meetings. One thing I just wanted to mention on the cyber insurance, which often gets overlooked actually, and it's often sort of seen as a control type for large organisations. But sort of recent changes with the UK's Cyber Essentials programme really caught my eye, because following the sort of transition to IASME now, if you kind of qualify the Cyber Essentials for your business, and I think that something like if your turnover is less than 20 million, getting Cyber Essentials through IASME gives you some cyber liability cover as part of that process. So it's not an addition you've got to buy for. Okay, the limits are probably a lot lower than a normal corporate enterprise policy, but it's something you can get there by kind of championing good practices. And I think that's often overlooked, and I think certainly needs more marketing done on the particular topic, because who wouldn't want free insurance if you've got to get through the Cyber Essentials process because your clients are asking you for, because it's a good thing to do. And I think it makes it a lot more accessible for organisations.
That's a very good point, actually, Christian.
Well, we're coming to our last 10 minutes, so I'm going to gently ask each panelist to wrap up, but I'm going to ask you to wrap up with two thoughts, please. One is, what do you think we are going to do, just assuming we come out of this lockdown sometime in the middle of 2021 or maybe the end of 21, and you might like to hypothesize on that. And also, have you got any real recommendations or suggestions or advice that you would give to the audience about this tricky but fascinating topic? Joe, could I start with you?
Yeah, as far as what's going to be happening, I think that an awful lot of what we're going to see is a change in the way that the firms actually organize themselves physically. The real estate organization CBR recently came out with a survey, their workforce sentiment survey, that said that 85% of employees have realized that working remotely actually does work, and management has agreed with that, and they would prefer to work at home 2 to 3 days a week, although almost everyone seems to also want to have office time for that interaction with people. And a lot of people said that in fact, almost half of the surveyed said that they would like to go to a branch office that was closer to where they lived instead of being in a downtown or in the city. Also, this same survey said that law firms paid 65% more, or they had 65% more office space per employee than other professions, which means that these are things that are going to be looked at by the CFOs, and they're going to be realizing we can cut down an awful lot on our costs of office space by having less expensive offices in the suburbs and more people working from home more of the time. And so what's going to be very important is going to be remote access and branch access in a secure manner. And there are tools for it. There's SD-WAN for branches, but it needs to be secure because, once again, that perimeter is dissolving. And so you have to make sure that it is well protected, which means identifying the users, identifying what applications they have access to. And the one piece of advice I would say that a lot of firms have not yet been thinking about is when it comes to remote access, most people now got in place VPNs and antivirus, and that is a minimum. That absolutely is the right thing to do. But now there are tools, EDM, tools, which allow you to actually see what's going on the computer and notice when bad activity is happening and quarantine it. But if, for example, there's a whole bunch of disk writes, then that could be an indication that there's ransomware that's starting to encrypt the disk, okay? And so it can cut that off, block that off, and that protects you beyond the VPN and the antivirus that's on that remote workstation. And that works whether the person's at home or in a branch office or in the central office. So those are the thoughts that I would leave you with.
Thank you very much. Carl?
So I think what's going to be happening, very much Joe's covered it, and that is the work anywhere, secure everywhere approach. We're going to be moving for sure away from everybody in a traditional office environment. I think as people start to look at their leases as they're coming up, they're going to look at not everybody being in the office at any one time. So it's up to us within the sort of technology and security fields to understand how we can help them with the journey. We're already starting to see just in this lockdown period, and I really hope it continues when we go back to the norm, paperless activity. We've just rolled out DocuSign, for example, and we're starting to see a lot of that happening as well. So all of these good practices that we've learned since we've been sort of evacuated our offices almost in March, we should now take them and learn to the future and not fall back to that way of normality. And I'd also argue as well, it's a great opportunity for us to have a look at our clear desk policy and our clear screen policies, you know, because we've been able to do it at home, and we haven't had everything around us, you know, about printing, for example, and everything like that. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to work from. And I guess from the topic today, you know, some recommendations for everyone is just understand your business and understand your people. Your people are very important. They are the first line of defense. They are the people that can help you get your message across, help you use your technology. They are, after all, the people using it mostly. And I can't impress just how important our people are in helping us along this journey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Christian, can you round us off on this one?
Sure. So I think as we head towards the new different, whatever that looks like for any organisation, I think we certainly see the reduction in real estate, but actually the creation of more social hubs and collaborative spaces that we perhaps took advantage of or kind of didn't use as much as we had before. The new office will be more a connection point for our people who have certainly felt isolated or adrift working remotely during this time. So I think that the dynamic of that office will change. I'm still hoping we've got a fridge full of beer and fancy wines when we get back, but we'll have to wait and see. In terms of the security implications of what that means, I think the security, as we've seen, as with the technology, will continue to evolve and support the business. We've moved headway, and the industry has moved headway in securing this new digital frontier, and I can see that continuing. We've gone through the last 12 months, which have probably been the hardest for technology and security teams alike. So I think the next 12 months will arguably be quite a breeze. In terms of kind of sort of final food for thoughts, and it's been touched on from Joe's comments as well as Carl's and your own, is around our people. And I think I would certainly perhaps end with the fact that don't underestimate the kind of old ways of engagement. We're seeing a lot of kind of Zoom fatigue, as it entitled, but kind of insert platform here, fatigue for virtual and digital engagements. And one of the things we're trialing and hopefully pushing forward into 2021 is kind of flipping back to kind of that old traditional ways, postcards, letters, physical things being sent through analog mail that arrives through their post box. Look at different ways of engaging with your people. Don't just rely on virtual ways, because I think they've certainly been done to death. There's certainly a future for them, and events and topics like this are fantastic for raising that conversation to kind of a wide audience, but also look at how else you can engage with your people.
I think the biggest challenge we may have going forward as we start to return will be trying to manage mixed environment working practices, with some people still at home, some people next to each other in the office, and how we ameliorate the stresses and differences that occur with that. So clearly we've got topics that we could continue to talk about for another hour or two without any problem at all. This is the second hour I've done with this particular group, and on both occasions I've wondered how the hell we were ever going to shut up. It's me, so I apologise for that. May I take this opportunity of thanking each one of my panel, Joe, Carl and Christian, for your contribution. It's been absolutely delightful, and we seem to have moved around this topic completely differently on our two conversations, and yet I think drawn some very interesting conclusions. May I also take the opportunity to thank Francis and NetLaw Media for hosting these events, which I think in this time of lack of social communication at least give us a bit of an interface and an opportunity to see each other and sort of nearly touch, at least metaphorically touch each other. And then finally, may I thank you, the audience, for giving up your time to come and to take part. And obviously, if there are questions you would have wished to ask, please do let NetLaw Media know, because I'm sure the panel would be very happy to try and answer them remotely if that's necessary. And then finally, can I remind you all that on the 27th of January, Shilpa from Linklaters will be talking to us all about transitioning from law practice to being a technologist. So that's 3 o'clock on the 27th of January, the next NetLaw Media event in this sequence. Thank you all very much. Stay safe. Good afternoon.